The 1970-80 season for the Montreal Canadiens and the Quebec Nordiques were a tale of two cities, literally. The Nordiques were coming into the NHL from the WHA, hoping for a good inaugural campaign despite losing most of their players, while Montreal was looking at maybe getting some WHA stars and former NHLers that played for them to augment their lineup because there was rumors going around this could be Guy Lafleur's second to last or last season in Montreal because of contract negotiations. And the way to play it out, the Nordiques eventually ended up towards the second tier of the NHL despite good prospects. Now, the 1980 campaign was the Nordiques' eighth season overall and marked the expansion year into the NHL, along with Hartford, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Now, they played their previous seven seasons, of course, at WHA. In '79, their last season WHA, they finished with the year with the second best record, with 41, 34, and 5, earning 87 points. The Nordiques unfortunately swept by the Jets in the semifinals to team, and in 1980, the team finished out of the playoffs. Now, during the offseason, the Nordiques, Oilers, Whalers, and Jets were admitted to the NHL. Quebec would be placed in the AB division in the Wales Conference. The other teams in the Nordiques division were Boston, Buffalo, Minnesota, and the Maple Leafs. Quebec held on to head coach Jacques Demers. Now, as many of the WHA players had their rights held by NHL teams, those squads were allowed to reclaim their players. In order to keep the NHL from taking all the talent from the WHA turn NHL teams, each incoming franchise were allowed to protect up to two goalies and two skaters. They were designated as priority selections in the '79 NHL expansion draft. The Nordiques eventually made a deal with the Blackhawks, in which Quebec would keep Réal Cloutier in exchange for the Nordiques' first-round draft pick in the 1980 NHL entry draft. Now, Quebec made a deal with the Canadiens in which Montreal selected Diane Jaffriot and Alan Cote for the Nordiques, rather than Marc Tardif and Richard David. I think that was a big mistake, Montreal not taking Marc and Richard. In exchange for this, the Nordiques relinquished a third-round pick in the '80 NHL entry draft, a second-round pick in the '81 NHL entry draft, and that the Nordiques would draft Alan Cote from the Habs at the '79 NHL expansion draft. Now, in June 28, '79, the Nordiques acquired Jamie Hislop from the Jets in exchange for Barry Legge. Hislop played with the Stingers in '79, scoring 30 goals and 70 points in 80 games. Now, the Nordiques eventually acquired goaltender Goran Augusta from the Islanders for goaltender Richard Brodeur. Augusta played the '79 season with the Fort Worth Texans with a 25, 29, and 4 record, with a 351 goals against average and an 877 save percentage. Brodeur had been with the Nordiques during the entire existence in the WHA. In '79, Brodeur went 25, 13, and 3 with a 311 goals against average and a 90.1 save percentage with Quebec. Now, at the '79 NHL entry draft, held on August 9th, the Nordiques selected Michel Goulet from the Birmingham Bulls of the WHA in the first round, 20th overall. Now, Goulet was an underage player in the WHA and therefore could be drafted in the NHL. In 78 games with the Bulls in '79, 28 goals and 58 points. In the second round, Quebec selected Dale Hunter from the Sudbury Wolves in the Ontario Major Junior Hockey League. Hunter had scored 34 goals and 85 points in 61 games during the '79 season. But the big deal, of course, in the fourth round, the Nordiques selected Anton Stastny from Slovan CHZ JD Bratislava of the Czech First Ice Hockey League. Stastny had 32 goals and 51 assists in 44 games during the '79 campaign. Now, another big signing was Robbie Ftorek on August 13th, who played the '79 season with the Stingers. Ftorek finished second at WHA scoring with 39 counters and 77 assists to earn 116 points in 80 games. Ftorek had previous NHL experience, as in 15 games for Red Wings from '72 to '74. He had 2 goals and 7 points. Now, Quebec played in the first ever NHL game on October 10, '79 at Le Colisée in Quebec City, the place where Jean Beliveau built, as the Nordiques lost 5-3 to the Flames. The Nords won their first ever NHL game in their third contest, defeating Colorado 5-2 in Denver. During the first half of the season, the Nordiques were very competitive, earning a 17-17-6 record as they held on to a playoff position. Unfortunately, wins were few and far between in the second half of the year as Quebec fell into last place and finished the campaign 25, 44, and 11, earning 61 points and missing the postseason. Now, eventually, the Nordiques were led by Cloutier, who in his first NHL season had a team best 42 counters and 47 assists for 89 points. Cloutier scored 3 goals in his National League debut, and Tardif also had a solid season, 33 goals and 68 points, while the Nords' first-round pick Michel Goulet had 22 goals and 54 points, to finish in third in team scoring. On the blue line, Dale Hoganson, back in the NHL, led the way, earning 40 points, while Pierre Lacroix had 9 goals and 30 points. Paul Baxter led the club with 149 penalty minutes. Now in goal, Michel Dion saw most of the action, appearing in 50 games, earning a team-high 15 victories and a 3.70 goals against average. Now offense wasn't her strong suit. They only scored a little bit over 3 goals a game. Now, ironically, the Nordiques season was quite interesting, but the biggest victory for a lot of people was the Halloween week 5-4 victory over the Montreal Canadiens in front of 11,908 fans at Le Colisée. That was a tremendous boost for the team. Now, the idea of Quebec that year, much stronger at home as compared to the road. And the games against Montreal were always high drama. February 14, the Valentine's Day Massacre, a lot of people call it, where the Habs outlasted Quebec 5-1 in that key game. Now, the last game of the season was a 4-4 tie with Montreal as a preamble of things to come with the Montreal-Quebec rivalry. Now, Rich Leduc also scored 21 goals that year for Quebec for 48 points, while Fatorik, and he's fractured French. He spoke French to the crowd a few times during certain ceremonies, had 51 points in 52 games. Now, Dion again 15, 25, and 6. Ron Lowe coming over from the WHA, 5-7-2, while Gordon Augusta went 5-12 and 3. Now, the Quebec Nordiques selections expansion draft included Dave Farish, Jerry Hart from the Islanders. Dave Farish, of course, with the Rangers. Ron Lowe came over to Detroit, but he did play in the WHA. Pierre Plante, Blair Stewart, John Baby, John Smirk, Dave Parot, Ken Kuzik, Roland Cloutier, Terry Martin from Buffalo, Jamie Masters, Hartland Monahan, Ron Andruff, Alan Cote, and Lars Zetterstrom from Vancouver. Now draft picks, Lee Norwood, very strong pick, number 3, Pierre Lacroix, number 5, and of course, Anton Stastny. Now, the ironic part was, ladies and gentlemen, the Cloutier deal, the Nordiques lost on that because that first round draft pick turned out to be Denny Savard. So I don't think they get the best of that trade. So the Montreal Canadiens deal in relation to Tardif and Richard David, Newberry and Erickson were draft picks for the third and second. Now, Hartland Monahan, again, traded June 13, 79. Parot was traded for Nelson Burton. Barry Melrose for Henslop and Leggy. Richard Bordeaux for going to Augusta. Dave Farish and Terry Martin for Reg Thomas. Ron Loeb traded to Quebec from Edmonton traded Edmonton for Ron Chipperfield, who went to Quebec. And Barry Leggy was eventually traded back to the Jets in May of 1980. Now, a part of it again, the Blackhawks promised to not take Réal Cloutier, one of its priority selections in the 79 NHL reclaimed draft, and the Canadiens promised to not take Danny Jaffreo and Alain Cote rather than Marc Tardif and or Richard David in the 79 NHL draft. Now, free agents included Bernie Saunders of Kalamazoo, Robbie Fatorik, Frederic Cermak, Dave Pichette, Jacques Richard from Buffalo, the former Atlanta Flames top player, Miroslav Fricher from Czechoslovakia, and Ken Kuzik for the Minnesota North Stars. Now, what was kind of ironic, ladies and gentlemen, later on, the big network TQS were showing a lot of their games, but I think at the time TVA, which was also showing Montreal games, were showing some Nordiques contests. And the Nordiques were just building in fan base because in some areas of Canada they're bigger in the English communities than the francophone communities because of Dale Hunter and some other key players. So again, it's it's a matter of who you figure was the best for the Nordiques that year. I think there was a lot of talent there that year, and the idea about the 79 80 Nordiques, it was people that could play in that small rink, and this wasn't the Buffalo, Boston, Hartford, Montreal Adams division of a couple of seasons after. Playing against the Leafs was a weird thing. So let's look at the rough roster and statistics. I want to make sure everybody's covered. Majority of francophone players, of course. Real Cloutier, Marc Tardif, Michel Goulet, Rob Victoric, Rick Leduc, Dale Hoganson, Jamie Hislop, Bob Fincher had 11 goals, Pierre Lacroix, Jerry Hart, Serge Bernier, Gary Lavrier, Paul Baxter, Pierre Plante, Reggie Thomas, Alain Côté, Jacques Richard, Wally Weir, Blair Stewart, Kurt Brackenberry, Ron Chipperfield, John Smirk, Roland Cloutier, Barry Legge, Paul Stewart, Ron Lowe, Louis Schleger, my distant cousin from Gaspé region of Quebec, Greg Thibault, Gilles Bilodeau, Johnny Stewart, Francois Lacombe, Terry Johnson, Terry Martin, Dave Farish, Bernie Sanders, Richard David, Goran Augusta, and Michel Dion. 248 goals scored, and again, very, very interesting season. Goran Augusta, one of the few Swedish goalies of the decade, and it was okay, but Michel Dion was the main guy for obvious reasons until Ron Lowe was traded. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of the 79-80 Nordiques and their inaugural NHL rookie campaign. If you like what we're doing here with our NHL podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, the Nordiques in 79-80 were quite the interesting watch because there was always something going on. A very hard-working team, just that the other teams had them outmatched. Again, thanks for listening. Bye.